Great. So good morning, everyone. Bonjour, kia ora. A very warm welcome. Bienvenue to this launch of the Sustainability Committee. And we are very happy to have you here this morning. Very good to see many of you who are regular, let's say, participants to the events of the Chamber, but also very happy to see actually many of you who are attending for the first time an event of the French New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, and we are delighted about that too. I invite you to put in the chat box your name, organization, and city. So like this, we have a chance to see that that this is working, and also that who is online, and that will help also for the Q&A session at the end. So in terms of housekeeping, you can see on the right-hand side of the slide different things. One important thing related to the Q&A is that we invite you to put your question actually during the presentation in the Q&A box, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. So big thanks actually to Gina and Vincent for putting this event together this morning. Big thanks also to Hélène and Zoe, who are co-chairs of this committee together with me. And a special thanks to David for accepting to be our keynote speaker this morning. Thank you very much, David.
Welcome.
So maybe before starting, we're going to have a few words on the Sustainability Committee. And why do we have why we have this committee, basically? So for the Chamber, we view the sustainable business as businesses which create a positive economic, social, and environmental impact. And the Chamber ambition is to accompany its members through advocacy, engagement, helping to accelerate progress and fostering collaborations. And this committee is acting as a platform for the members for learning, sharing, and networking. So there are different things we like to achieve. One is to increase the understanding of key sustainability and climate change issues in New Zealand. Another one is to share practical approaches for how French companies are leveraging new opportunities for growth, performance, and competitiveness that also delivers positive environmental and social outcomes. Another one is to be part of a forum convening New Zealand and French companies to advance the dialogue, collective action, and business opportunities around sustainability and the circular economy. Another one, this should be an opportunity also to network and to be part of the sustainability community in New Zealand. And finally, is also to promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So how do we want to achieve or to deliver these strategies? There are, let's say, three pillars. One of them is to offer events and give access to knowledge to help all members towards becoming sustainable businesses or more sustainable businesses. The second one is to promote the expertise of our members in the field and foster collaboration with New Zealand entities. And finally, the third one is to become a sustainable chamber of commerce by integrating sustainability into our operations. So moving forward, we put few ideas of events or conferences on the next slide. And basically, in terms of save the dates, our next presentation or webinar will be on the 30th of March at 8 a.m. And this will be the first presentation in New Zealand of Time for the Planet. And this will be with one of the co-founders and the director for their international development. We have another event which will be by invitation only on the 6th of May, which will be a climate fresque workshop. And then we will have our sustainability forum, which will be in June. And you attended maybe the previous edition in the previous years. So that will be something that will look similar in a way. So you can see on the right-hand side different keys. So we organize this through conference workshop, but also through site visits. So we're discussing with Veolia, but also with Watercare to visit some of their facilities. And we'll have other conferences, workshop ideas together with DataGrid, South Island Project, and a few others. And we're looking also at networking opportunities, possibly some afterworks with other organizations. I think one important message is that, and you can see, be a speaker. We invite you actually, our members and non-members who will become member maybe, to propose and contact us if you have some ideas or things you would like to present, speakers that you know, topics you're interested to learn about. So just reach out to Gina, Vincent, Helen, myself, and we'll be happy to try to put this together. Helen, I think I pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. And Gina, we can go to the next slide. So Morena, bonjour and good morning, of course. Today, I'm very happy to introduce David Benattar, Chief Sustainability Officer for the Warehouse Group. So I had a little bit of a chat with David before this morning, and I understood that his goal was to make the Warehouse Group the most sustainable retailer in New Zealand. It's not a small goal, but I think they are on a great journey that is going to talk a little bit about. So David is responsible for embedding ESG and GRI across the Warehouse Group, all the investment-related decision and the board governance. So he is providing direction on group initiative to champion as well social equity. So when we are saying social equity, it's about youth employment, gender diversity, paid equity, and healthier homes. So David is a busy bee, is on the advisory board of the New Zealand Sustainable Council, and he also represented the Climate Leaders Coalition at COP25 in Madrid, but also COP26 in Glasgow. And so we are lucky that Frederick managed to convince David to come and speak about the COP, and that's a topic very close to his heart. So today we are here to hear a little bit from David about the findings following his attendance at the COP last November, and also discuss how businesses can really lean and also learn from the COP on how business leaders like the Warehouse are using ESG to transform the value chain. So I hope, David, that through your story, we'll also understand a little bit more about the role of a CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer, and why it is so crucial for any business that wants to make a difference. So yes, and I think I'm quite excited to hear from you. So I'm gonna stop in a minute, but just to recap, if you guys on the call have any question, please add them into the Q&A box, and we'll take them at the end of David's presentation. So David, welcome, and over to you.
Good morning, bonjour, tout le monde. It feels good not to be alone with my French accents. Normally when I speak publicly, everybody's struggling, and today everybody has this heavy, beautiful French accent, and we can still understand each other, so it's wonderful, and it makes me feel at home, and so that's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we can look, and I can tell you the story of what I learned at COP26, what I think you should pay attention to, and then I'll tell you about what the Warehouse Group has been doing over the past few years and how we've been transforming our business activities to put ESG and sustainability at the very center of what we do. So not at the periphery, but at the center. So let me share my screen. All right, so again, I want quickly to take you through what I experienced at COP26. I just want you to feel what I learned over there, because there's a lot of that, which is about being on the ground among 50,000 people from all over the world, who all of them are experts on different dimensions of decarbonizing our world economy, and all of them participating in the conversation of how we're supposed to do it, by when, and with what solutions. And so that's just a collage to show you the diversity of what happens over there. And you'll see that they were on the left corner there. There is obviously a picture in the streets, because what happens among activists is very important. But let's carry on. What you need to know is that based on the actions and policies that were announced at COP26, so targets, but non-binding targets, including net zero announcements. So companies and countries who announce that they have an ambition to be net zero. If you look at all of that, we would be at about 1 plus 1.8 degrees of temperature increase against pre-industrial age. This is non-binding targets. If we look on the opposite at action based on current policies that have been recorded and registered, we are at about plus 2.7 degrees of global temperature increase by 2100, by 2021, by the year 2100, imagine that. And we all know that the breakthrough point is plus 1.5 degrees. So we've made progress, but we're not there yet. And what COP26 focused on were really, there was 9 takeaways. I won't go into all the details, but I just want to give you enough understanding so you see what were the key pillars and building blocks of the agreement. Some of you will understand the details, others will not, and then you can ask me questions at the end. So one of the major agreement that was made at COP26 was the phasing down of coal. So when people ask, was COP26 special? Was it important? Was it successful? Well, we can go back to the phasing down of coal. Phasing down, I'm not sure if you remember that there was negotiations and conversation about phasing out or phasing down. And to come to an agreement, the word phasing out was replaced by down. So there was lots of negotiations to come to an agreement, but there was an agreement at COP26, and I think that's what matters the most. At COP26, there was also a methane pledge where I think more than 30 countries agreed to reduce methane by 30% by 2030. And among these countries were New Zealand. And you may know that about 40% of New Zealand greenhouse gas emissions come from the farming sector. It's a very special profile, emission profile for our country here. I'm not sure what the emission profile is for France, actually. But that tells us, again, another commitment that can impact our economy quite drastically. There was a deal between China and the US, which is really important as well. It's the first time that these two superpowers come to an agreement on decarbonization, even if we lacked specifics about the nature of the agreement. There was an agreement for each country to come back to the table with another cut at the emission reduction budget in 1 year. That's a big deal. I'm not sure if you know, but it took New Zealand a long time to come back with a revised budget on what we call NDCs, National Determined Contributions, which is the budget of carbon emission that each country can emit in a year. And by the way, guys, when a country makes a commitment to a carbon emission budget, this commitment cascade down to industry sectors. And these industry sectors then impact us and you in our organizations, depending on the industry where we are. There was a building block on loss and damage, which is what the developed countries are supposed to allocate for loss and damage imposed on developing nations, who are the nations suffering the most from the impact of climate change. There was an agreement on the carbon trading rules. What is that? Carbon trading is countries being able to trade carbon credits, carbon units between countries. Very important for a country like New Zealand, where we don't have a clear reduction pathway to net zero without using offshore carbon units. You can ask me questions about that at the end if you like. The Warehouse Group is buying carbon credits from offshore, from China, Bangladesh, and India. Why? Because this is where we produce our goods. There was an agreement about stopping deforestation. I'm sure you've heard about that. That's a big deal. But this agreement was also made 15 years ago and the signatories were not able to respect this agreement. So, you know, again, agreement, what does that mean? A commitment, what does it mean? A pledge, what does it mean? How binding are these agreements and this pledge? And then there's an agreement from the banks to commit $130 trillion to ESG funds, ESG mining investments, and to decarbonize that portfolio, which means phasing out fossil fuel. And there are many nuances about the transition and phasing out of fossil fuel investments in the bank investment portfolio. It's a big topic these days. And by the way, on the banks, BNP is part of the signatories, and other French banks are there. So that's, again, a big deal that will impact many of the practices around us. We can talk about that later. So what business should learn from COP26? There's one thing you need to keep in mind, is that this is what Al Gore said. We are tasked with the scale of the industrial revolution that needs to happen at the speed of the digital revolution. When you are in your organization today, this is how you need to talk about decarbonization and sustainability. You need to equal it to the digital transformation of the past 20 years. And really, if we have to keep one thing in mind, is COP26 is all about net zero. It is the agenda item. It is the North Star for countries and organizations. So if you are a CEO today, or if you advise a CEO today, the question you need to ask is, what is my plan to net zero? So there is 10 simple truths about net zero that I'm going to walk you through. And actually, I'm going to look at my notes so I can be specific about this. Truth about net zero. The first thing you need to do is, again, and I think I've made that clear to you, is the commitment and the pledge made at about net zero at COP26 are insufficient. So we are not where we need to be. That's the first thing. The second thing is to stay where we need to be where we need to be within 1.5 degrees. That's the number you need to remember, 1.5 degrees of temperature increase. We need to reduce emission by 50% by 2030. It's a simple number. Any organization you are now, if you work in transportation, in industry, in construction, in banking, your target is minus 50% by 2030. As I said, net zero, the third truth is that that's the universal language now. That is the one baseline reference point that every organization and every country, every investor, every analyst will look at. If you're being analyzed, if you're being reviewed, that's what your stakeholders will look at. Do you have a plan and a view to net zero? The fourth truth you need to know is that to achieve net zero, we need to adopt the same mindset as the mindset we used for the digital transformation of the past 20 years. I touched on that already. The fifth thing you need to know is that there is no single silver bullet to achieving net zero and decarbonizing our business and economy. There's no silver bullet. I'll talk to you about the technologies available to reach net zero after that. The sixth truth is that to redirect the trillions of dollars that we need to use to decarbonize our economy and transition, we need some certainty. Business needs certainty. And certainty means we need policies, we need regulation. So this is what the ETS is doing in New Zealand, or what the ETS has been able to do in Europe. The emission trading scheme in Europe has allowed for a 40% reduction in carbon emissions in Europe over the past 15 years. That is a huge success. And another truth that we need to be aware of is that as countries and governments should give us certainty with policies, we businesses need to take a leadership role. And leadership role also means that we need to support and reward sustainability solution providers. So you and your business look at your materiality and look at your suppliers and look at the sustainability solution providers, and your role is to support them. So for example, at the warehouse, what we did is we committed to electrification of our light commercial fleet. And we did that 3 years ago. And we said we are committing to a minimum of 30% of our fleet to be transitioned. Well, in fact, today we are 80% already transitioned. That gives the suppliers certainty and visibility. And we need to give them that so the market can develop. Then finally, what I would tell you is net zero means that you as a business, we as a business need to understand our full value chain, which means upstream and downstream emissions, which means for the warehouse, for example, it's the emissions that are generated when we manufacture the products that we sell in New Zealand. It's also the emissions that you, our customers, generate when you travel to our stores. It's not exactly easy to measure that, right? So there's lack of data that we need to address as well. So the idea of decarbonizing is about the full value chain in which we need to use partnership and collaborations, right? So that's another truth about net zero is that partnerships and collaborations at the center of the instruments we need to use to decarbonize our value chain. And then finally, I would say it's transparency, honesty, and innovation are really at the center again of this transformation effort. So the question is, what is your plan? So that's about net zero. What I want to tell you about what happened at COP26 is that we saw indigenous and gender rights in climate mitigation and resilience planning. It means that we talk about net zero as an energy or economy transformation engine, but it's not. It's a fully embedding social, economic, and environmental transformation. It's really important to know that because you need to put people at the center of this transformation, which is why we talk about a transition plan and we talk about a fair transition or just transition so that there is no community left out. So we need to understand the social impact of transitioning from one source of energy to another. Remember what we went through in Europe and in France when we're starting to phase out or to externalize some industries and the impact of employment. We don't want that. We want to manage the transition. Again, we need policies and certainty. I go faster, but really the point is the elements of growth, sustainability, and inclusion are deeply connected. Deeply connected. The environmental, the social, the human element, they all together. I thought I would show you that picture because it's. I went into the demonstrations on Saturday afternoon, and there was 100,000 people there in the streets of Glasgow. So it's pretty powerful when you see that, right? And you see kids and activists and mothers and families all there, all beating the drums and asking for stronger action now, because there is still a sense that we do not get the sense of urgency, that the concept of urgency is not used in the way it should be used to achieve the transformation we need to achieve. So you see very moving images of people on the ground being really calling for stronger government and business actions. I show you more of these pictures because I think it gives you an idea of the ambiance over there. And what you see is, again, these activists really reminding the delegates and the business and government delegates that this is the time for action now. So look, read at this. You can read this billboard here. Keep 1.5 degrees alive on your shoulders now. Very powerful images. And again here, what it reminds you is that whatever business you are in today, if you do not decarbonize your business, you will be irrelevant in a few years. And I mean it. So it means obviously that if you still manufacture ICE cars, right? If you are still heavily investing in fossil fuel, if you don't have a plan to transition, you are irrelevant to the market, to your employees, to your investors. So you should think about that hard, because these are obviously the most extreme activists, right? This is what you see in the street of Glasgow. But think about your average customer and how much of that is percolating into the mass market. And as the media and as the activists and as the nonprofit do their jobs, more and more is coming through. This is why the younger generation is so much more aware of climate action and so much more demanding. So if you want to employ them, think about that. I finished that with Vanessa Nakate, which was one of the most powerful activists. And what she said is, we've been there before. We've been at conferences before, and we don't trust you. So I leave that video in the chat box and you can watch it later. I'm asking you to watch this video because it's the most powerful call to really say, prove us wrong. Prove us that you can in fact make commitments and follow through and deliver the transition, because my people, this is what she explained, in Uganda, in Africa, in the global south, my people are suffering the first. They are on the front line of climate change. It's not us here in New Zealand. We are not on the front line, guys. It's the global south. It's people in Bangladesh, in India, it's in Africa. It's the countries where they have the less capability to transform and adapt quickly. And it's also where, by nature of the temperature and the climate where they live, any increase in temperature increase has dramatic impact on food production, on ability to move, on livability, and so forth. So how we get there? There is a bunch of technologies available to us today. And if you read the McKinsey report, Vivid Economics, there is a very clear roadmap to decarbonization on electrification, agriculture, on power, hydrogen, carbon capture, and there is technologies available today. And you probably know which of these technologies are relevant to your industry. So I would again call you and ask you to read that report because it gives a very detailed roadmap to the rollout of these technologies. And us, how do we do at the Warehouse Group? So I'll spend 5 minutes about how we applied that approach and that vision at the Warehouse Group, and why we decided to become the most customer-centric, the most convenient, and the most sustainable company in New Zealand. Customer-centric, convenient, sustainable. And how we started it, you see, there was not big talk about decarbonization or phasing out fossil fuel, right? Coffee cups. Removing single-use coffee cups from the cafeteria of your employees will have a big impact. It will make them think twice about their everyday actions. Yeah, a small action like that. But obviously, we combine that with much bigger programs. We became carbon neutral in 2019 on our scope 1, 2, and some of our scope 3 emissions, the emissions associated with the shipping of our products. So if you buy a product from the warehouse, all the emissions associated with the shipping and logistics are carbon neutral. They've been offsetted. And then we launched a campaign on our products. So you know that you can shop at the warehouse and our products are becoming more sustainable. And we define sustainability with specific attributes on the ingredients and on the packaging. And we're expanding this number. You see 4,500, we are now more than 11,000 products. So it means we are investing in resources, in capabilities, in skills. We are retraining our team members. We are embedding it in our processes. We are embedding in our policies, in the way we select our suppliers. And then obviously we transform our transportation. So you see that these new electric vehicles, and they're cool, good energy delivery, good to go. Because obviously you always want to make the customer experience part of the message, right? And then what we did is we sponsored the America's Cup, the Emirates Team New Zealand, to offset its carbon emissions from the 36th America's Cup campaign. That was the first time that a syndicate from the America's Cup was carbon neutral. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, you see a French brand here? You recognize it, I'm sure. You see Nespresso. We had Torpedo 7, which is a brand of the Warehouse Group, and then we had the Market as well. The Market this year was a big sponsor, and the Market was sponsored of the America's Cup as a partner for decarbonization and carbon neutrality. So this is how we started our journey from 19 to where we are today. Where we are today, we hit $300 million in sales from product with sustainability attributes. That's a real stepping stone for us. In November 2021, we launched our first sustainability-linked loan with Westpac, which means that we got favorable terms by associating sustainability targets to our loan facility. So there is a few basis points, lower terms, because if we meet specific targets, and these targets are on the most material areas of our activity. The most material of the warehouse, what is it? It's of course packaging and waste and energy and social impact and gender equity. So we ran a materiality exercise of our impact areas, and we selected the most material impact areas to define targets. And based on achieving these targets, we're getting more favorable terms on that sustainability linked loan, SLL. So you'll hear a lot about that in the market these days. You'll hear about green bonds and sustainability linked loans. In September 2021, we formed a new ESG board committee. In May 21, we set up new targets. And you can see in September 20, our annual report mentioned sustainability 73 times, up from 42 times the year before. In December 19, our CEO and myself attended COP25 in Madrid. Anyhow, so this is giving you a view on our roadmap. And really, the way we're framing our progression is to these 4 stages of sustainability and ESG leadership. And our goal is to be fully vetted, stage 3 leadership by 2025, and then moving beyond to reset our ecosystem, innovate and collaborate, and launch new business models. Right now, we are in the integration phase of ESG and sustainability in every aspect of our business activities and process and system and products, performance, data. So that's this integration through our business ecosystem. So again, product portfolio, process systems, positions, engagement, performance metrics and incentive, and people and culture. So I'll let you look at that and see how it's applied to your business. And ask yourself the question, where are you in that stage integration? Are you in a stage 1, which are initial risk mitigation, good enough? Are you in stage 2, where you're starting to do good initiatives, mostly focused on the externalities? Or are you in stage 3, where you are making trade-offs? You stop selling products that don't fit your commitments. You stop investments that do not fit your commitments. You're measuring output and performance value at stake linked to your commitments. Where are you in that journey? And again, what is your ecosystem made of? And how are you embedding ESG leadership in your own ecosystem? So what we've set, I spoke about setting targets to 2025, and I told you that we have linked this target to our sustainability linked loan. So this is how we broke down our ESG ambitions into 3 buckets. One bucket is our customers, another bucket is our product, and the planet, and the last bucket is social impact and the family's health and well-being. So that's how we built our commitment, and there is a vision around that. Obviously, there are commitments and targets. So here what you see is a vision and targets, but we also have commitment in between. So part of these targets is, for example, generate 50% of our private label sales from products with sustainability attributes. Likewise with packaging. Likewise, how we move our suppliers, traceability of our suppliers in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Understanding the emissions embodied in the making of the products we sell to our customers. Very complicated. Complicated because of the lack of data, portability, and transparency in between systems. But we need to get there, and this is not proper to the warehouse, it's proper to global supply chain, how we move data from one point to the other, and how we tracking carbon emissions and how, and who is responsible for these emissions based on regulation and commitments. Then there is, obviously for the warehouse, again, building towards circularity in our value chain and net zero emissions. So achieving emissions reduction in scope 1 and 2, achieving zero waste, expanding e-waste solution. So for example, now you can go to a number of non-lending store. Non-lending is part of the warehouse group. And you can go, instead of buying your products, you can dump your products. So you can go there and dump your old printer or your old tablet or your old whatever. And we recycle them. Actually, up to 90% of what we collect is dismantled and reused into new products. So we created a circular economy around the electronic products and waste we collect in our stores. And we did that through a partnership, because remember, in the principle of Net Zero, I spoke about partnerships and collaborations. So we did a partnership with Tech Collect, which is itself a member-based organization with HP, Epson, Canon, and so forth. And we have an ecosystem of suppliers that can process the waste that we collect in our stores. And we have thousands of customers who are going back to our stores, which means that we own the relationship with these customers. So you can already imagine how we embed this process in our loyalty programs. And then the last bucket I want to talk to you about before I close is how we make a measurable difference to families' health and well-being. And this is about contribution to New Zealand communities, reducing child poverty. We also are focusing on period poverty in New Zealand. And we have a big role to play in youth development as a pathway to economic well-being. And as you can imagine, as we support youth develop employment, we also benefit from it because these are young people who will later at some stage work for the warehouse. These are young people who will later at some stage become customers of the warehouse. So there is also a logic in how we feed into the ecosystem of customers, future customers, today customers, and our own commitment on ESG. So our call to close this presentation is let's prove Vanessa wrong. Again, I'll put that link into the chat, and I'm asking you to watch her talk at COP26. And this is how I want to finish that introduction. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, David. I've personally learned heaps, and I love the way you're telling the story. It's very easy to follow. And quite impressive transformation that you went through at the warehouse group. So I've got questions for you, which is awesome. One of the things that you said at the beginning is that people should be at the center of the transformation. So what does it mean for businesses, and what are incentives potentially that businesses could put their efforts towards that transformation?
So there is no one size fits all answer to that question. It's a complicated question. There's no one size fits all because obviously we all have different type of engagement on social impact, communities, and employment. And so that's one. So that's about us as a business. Then there is specificity to our industries and specificity to the country. In New Zealand, there is a task force from the Sustainable Business Council to design what would be a just transition and understand the social impact of that transition. But again, look, you think about phasing out the handpoint facility and what would be the impact on employment, or you think about if you are Z Energy and you're starting to close stations, what would be the impact on these employees? I think that's how you have to look at sector-specific impact area and understand how you should consider the human impact, social impact of the transition. It's definitely not an easy question, and as you can tell, I don't have a clear answer to give you. I just know that we are becoming more and more aware that there will be a social impact to transitioning our economy to decarbonization, and this needs to be considered from the get-go. Also, what I can tell you is that in the global south, in the developing countries, women are the most first impacted by climate change, because if, for example, the food production becomes impacted, they are the ones who lose their job the first and who have to go back home to take care of the kids. So it's going back against social progress, and which is terrible because we've made some gains over the past years and now we're going to go back. So that's something to consider. So I'm not giving you a clear answer, but these are some of the elements to take into consideration.
All right. coming back to you and your role as a Chief Sustainability Officer, so how did it come to be at the warehouse? And yeah, how did that happen? And for a business that today does not have yet this type of role, what advice would you have for them to develop their internal leadership?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. First, it came through because two reasons. Our CEO, Nick Grayston, always had a vision that sustainability was a key driver for performance. And he's always seen circularity or always been benchmarking against global leaders like in the US, like IKEA or Everlane, or looking what Nike is doing and looking at what all these global retailers have been investing in. So there is obviously some lack of leadership in New Zealand. That's one. Second is our history and the values of the business were very grounded in community impact. And actually the mission or the purpose of the company is to help Kiwis live better every day. And there is a long history of give back, because what you may not know is that about 51% of the warehouse shares are owned by our founder, Sir Stephen Tindall. And of these shares, a large portion goes into K1W1, and the other portion goes to the Tyndall Foundation, which means the Tyndall Foundation does catalytic philanthropy into New Zealand communities, which means that really looking at social impact as one of the values of the business. So you have the history from the founder, and then you have the vision of the CEO. So in between, the recognizing that sustainability is a key driver of performance was a natural evolution, and the role of CSO was created about 3 years ago. So look at your own history and journey, and I think it's about convincing your CEO and showing him the value creation that comes from sustainability. To understand the value creation, you need to do some work around the materiality, your market, your stakeholders, looking at what areas, opportunities, and risks you have ahead of you. And it's about telling the story and really showing the connection between the commitments and the value at stake. So there is an educational work to be done there. And the role of CSO is the role of a diplomat or educators to educate all the stakeholders around you, your employees, your leadership, your value suppliers, and your partners around what is the value creation opportunity, what is the risk and opportunity that are connected to climate action or sustainability at large. So that's sort of the challenge and what you should look into.
Some of the businesses on the call are not all corporate. So is there any tools to help businesses to understand the current state of play that we could reference or could share after that call?
Yeah, so there's two things. So for large business in New Zealand, large businesses should go probably to the CLC, the Climate Leaders Coalition, or the Sustainable Business Council. SMEs should look at the Sustainable Business Network. Both organizations, Sustainable Business Network and Sustainable Business Council, both of them have toolboxes that you can tap into to build your knowledge base. And then they can also reference some potential partners or consultants or other organizations that are industry specific that can help you in your own journey. And there's like there's a whole landscape of them. So start with SBC or SBN. SBN for SMEs, SBC for large organizations.
All right. Looking maybe like back to like the more holistic picture. So what would be, or what do you think, or what have you heard? What are the mechanisms discussed at the COP that to ensure eventually that the commitments that have been taken there are followed through?
So one of the developments that's really interesting today is the rise of sustainable finance. And sustainable finance is really becoming mainstream activity, which means that every bank and investors are looking at your ESG commitments and investments and reporting to ensure that you actually are considering sustainability as a risk and opportunity. And to do that, there is a rise of ESG reporting. And ESG reporting use various formats, various standards and frameworks. And these various frameworks give a view on your level of activities and focus on investments on sustainability and climate and ESG. So that trend of finance putting pressure on the market, and then the market putting pressure on finance, is a very sort of positive and positive development that I think will sort of move the entire economic sector into more greater type of sustainable action. You can also, in your own everyday choices, make your voice heard and ensure that the type of commitment being discussed at COP26 are becoming part of your elected officials' agenda, right? So we have the election in France going on soon. What is the agenda of each of the candidates on decarbonizing the economy and
yeah, and talking about, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there was a gap in the network. Talking about politics a little bit, government, because there was a question from Alexandre that just pop up. Sorry, what's your vision about the private sector to achieve eventually their goals or SDGs ahead of some government initiative?
Yes, that's a great question, because we always wonder who should drive the transformation. Is it government or business? And today, really, the private sector has such a huge role to play. The private sector is more reactive and faster to transform, is more agile and more adaptive. And the private sector also has the benefit of almost real-time feedback from the market, right? We speak to our customers, we speak to our employees, we speak to our investors, boom, done, you have the feedback immediately. So I think that chance to drive the transformation and innovate, understand what pockets of growth you can achieve through sustainability is transformative, but it requires to have the leadership courage to make that happen. In the same way that in the public sector, in the government sector, you need political will to make the transition happen. In the private sector, you need to have leadership courage to see opportunities for transformation. So that's sort of the challenge that I would throw at you guys around the table. What is your leadership ambition to go and help your organization see what's happening, understand that this transition is happening now, not in 10 years. The market is shifting right now, and where should you focus? Where should you prioritize your effort? So there's an exercise of prioritization and education that you need to do in your organization.
Cool. Thank you. That's very good. I've also seen someone to, sorry, you added another resource. So we'll follow up with you guys on an email after that, and we'll put the different toolbox or resources that are available. So coming back to you, David, did you develop any partnerships to address those challenges, the sustainability challenges of the warehouse group? Because that's one of the things that we can observe about sustainability. It's almost impossible to achieve that on your own, right? Yeah. You have to partner with stakeholders, with other organizations. So have you developed any strong partnership at the warehouse?
Yeah, the latest one was really Tech Collect, this member-based organization. And Tech Collect is using the work we on e-waste that we launched in our stores to produce a report that will be used by the government and the Ministry for the Environment to inform recycling scheme regulation, mandatory recycling scheme, mandatory, which means that every electronic goods producer or retailer will have to participate in that. And so that's an example of a collaboration. But we do that in absolutely every aspect of our sustainability journey. We do it in the way we work with our factories in China and Bangladesh. We have social impact programs with organizations. We do it with, for example, we source cotton from Better Cotton Initiative, which is a group of farmers that produce cotton in a way that has low impact and social impact and fair trade practices. So again, guys, in every single aspect of our sustainability journey, we use partnership collaboration with external stakeholders and member-based organizations.
Yeah. Do you think there is anything that could prevent you to achieve the targets that you have set yourself for the warehouse group? Or how can you prevent that eventually? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we can fail on our targets. How can I prevent it? Wake up earlier and go to bed later, maybe? Work hard.
Yeah, I'm sure you're already working really hard. Or really smart, maybe both. Yeah. Well, I guess it's a large question though, but it's a complicated question to answer. But
it's a complicated question, and it's a very challenging question, particularly as we are now again doing a deep dive on our capabilities, capacities, skills, mindset, expertise, technical expertise. We are reviewing everything constantly, and we always push ourselves to go harder and to really challenge how equipped we are to deliver on our commitments. Are these the right commitments? Are the targets aligned with the commitment? The resources and investment? What is the value at stake? How do we justify the investment? I think it's a very complicated discipline, but it's worth it. It's the biggest challenge of our time. And it's also worth it economically, because the leaders of today are the winners of tomorrow. Let's not make any mistake. The biggest billionaire today in the world, the wealthiest person in the world, is a person who's developed a zero carbon transportation vehicle, right? It's Elon Musk. Make no mistake. If you do it, you will win. If you don't, you're out, and you will be out very soon. I hope my message is clear to everybody.
Yeah, I think it's very clear. I'm sure people in the chat will say so as well. Yes. Looking back to what happened at the COP and at the picture that you've shown us earlier, were there many business representatives there at the demonstration on that Saturday afternoon? And those participants, were they describing themselves more as activists or more of a, what we would say, like representative of the society?
Yeah, good question too. So there was, I don't know about the business participants in the protest. I don't know. They looked a bit like more civil society and activists and young people to me, and mothers and families. And it was a very powerful energy, but there was a huge business delegation at COP26 this year. Like this year, business made a show of force at COP. COP was business this year like it's never been before. And it was really positive for us. I met suppliers and partners, and I've learned so much because of the presence of business. Were they in the demonstration? I don't know. But I know the demonstrators were at the gate, stopping everybody getting in. So trust me, the business people and the business delegates did see the activists and did hear the message for sure.
Yeah. I've got a few more questions, but maybe one or two more. And thank you. People are loving it, by the way. I don't know if you're looking at the question and answer, but that's extremely comprehensive and interesting. And thank you so much for being so passionate. If we come back to New Zealand now, the clients, partners, or your suppliers, are they really receptive eventually today, or people are still looking at the price points?
Yeah.
Is there a change? Do you observe a trend? Is there any positive impact on all the ESG action that you've basically taken so far?
So look, there's not a switch from day one to day two where suddenly people say we're transforming or we're seeing the world differently. It's not how it happens. So it's a gradual insertion of sustainability as a value driver in our product sourcing attributes, for example, right? But it's category by category. And then you start with what's the low-hanging fruits, where easy to do it, right? And that's how you're progressing your transformation in the business. In the same way, think about how you build your digital transformation and your capabilities and awareness. It's gradual, and there are a few stepping stones, right? And the stepping stones is because you observe a disproportionate participation in some of the programs, for example, or you're launching an initiative and suddenly you have 20% of revenue online, and that changes your perspective. But what matters is that you keep pushing even when you're in the dark. So I can't tell you exactly how people are shifting their mindset. And I know I'm still bumping against sort of blockers and perception drivers. I know that, look, if 1 year you have exceptional financial results, it's easier to push the agenda forward. But you need to be in the difficulty stages. This is when you are in the frictions, when you are in debate that you are going to extract real transformation. So I don't have a clear answer to your question. I think it's a great question. And my experience, I don't have enough distance yet to be able to give you a very detailed review of how I went through it. And I keep on bumping against the same barriers. So I think it's an ongoing transformation.
All right. And last question, because we are bilateral chamber, sorry. Do you think there is anything that New Zealand could learn from France and maybe reverse, vice versa, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so France, for example, there's lots of similarities in between two countries because we are both regulation heavy, right? We are both a high percentage of renewable energy generation. In France, because of nuclear. In New Zealand, because of hydro. So we share a few similarities. You know, France passed, for example, regulation on gender representation on boards or gender representation on leadership teams, passed a regulation, and it's completely transformed the profile of boards, gender profiles, and now it's leadership that's been passed like last year. So there's a lot of similarity, lots of learning. For example, the European Union passed regulation on planetary labels on products. Well, New Zealand needs to look at that. What's happening in Europe will come here at some stage. And if you look at the UK is very intensely focused on decarbonizing the finance sector. So I think there's so many bridges, and it's a great question. Just keep monitoring the European market and the French markets, and there's so much to learn. Definitely, yes.
Great, thank you. And we will. I think that's one of the roles of that committee.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, David. I mean, that was extremely insightful and in a way moving. I think I feel very moved right now, and I think I definitely maybe want to have more conversation with my CEO and our sustainability team to see how we can be maybe slightly more ambitious. So that was very interesting to hear all of that from you, David, from a warehouse group perspective, but also on what happened at the COP26 and how we can continue a little bit to shake the trees harder, so we can make a difference. So thank you very much for that, and. I hand over to Frederick for the closing.
Thank you, Hélène. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. Actually, it will be short and sweet, I think. Just a big thanks to David. It was very, as you said, inspiring and insightful and inspirational in a way. So thanks for that. Much appreciated. I think we have hundreds more questions we like to ask you. So we'll keep that for this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Big thanks for that. We will send to the big thanks to all the participants for your questions. That was very very good, very useful. It's good to have this kind of interaction, and we do that for you. So thanks very much for that. We are going to send to the participant the links that you mentioned, also the video, and also links to the organization you mentioned, SBN, SBC, and so on, so that we try to send all the information that you have mentioned during this morning. And it's 9 o'clock. Thank you very much. Wish you a great day, and see you soon. Merci.